Right. Thanks very much for all the mayors for this great contribution. As you can see, I mean, it's a wide range of different initiatives and different contexts, and that's what we need to learn in the future. But now it's time to get the panel together and start to asking a few questions to the mayors. Let me start by in Germany. I mean, Karlsruhe is a fantastic city. It's a city that was built in a park initially. It's a city that have promoted transport, or better, we call it active mobility, but also to develop and promote digitalization in the city. So let me ask Lord Mayor Mentrup first. How do you see green infrastructure impact? Because you already got a city in the park in a way. How can you integrate that with the last initiatives of urban mobility as well as digitalization in the city? How do you see the future of that integration?
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Elkadi. I'm very happy to see you again. I hope you have a good stay in Karlsruhe. Some months belong. I think we discussed two strategies we have to accept. One strategy is to get greener cities, to save the quality of life in a time where the temperature increases higher and higher. And this is a kind of strategy to save the life, but not first the strategy to reduce the energy production and use. And so you have to take a second strategy to take a communal and local responsibility in our struggle against climate change. And these are two different things, but you have to do it together. And so first, you've said it, you have to ask how you could change the way to move, how you could change the way to live, how you could change the way to use your free time, and how to reduce the using of energy, which is the carbonization result. And in Karlsruhe, in our city, in the 90th of the last century, our public transport system has taken the iron parts from we take in our regime the parts which our normal Bundesbahn, our big public transport of the state didn't want to use no longer. And so we take this part of the ironways in our local responsibility, and then have taken a system of a tram train system, first in Europe, to connect the city lines of the public transport with the regional lines of public transport. Now this is a very important step. They take the cradle in the 90s, knowing nothing about climate change. And now it's the structure to use to take more. Our aim is that we would like to reduce the using of private cars and to put the people to the bicycle and to the public train system. And so we could start with the history and we could develop it in the future. And so this is our strategy for the changing of mobility. But you need also equivalent changes for the energy sector, for the building sector, and other sectors of local responsibility.
Right, thank you very much, Frank. I mean, certainly Karlsruhe is a fantastic place to visit. You can feel how developed it in terms of sustainability and sustainable mobility over there as well. I have a question here from the audience for all mayors. It said, as mayors from a wide range of countries, what do you think is the role of municipalities in creating regulations that incentivize developers to include NBS in all new development. I'm not quite sure who would like to answer the question. Maybe I can go to Canada, if David can hear us there. David Mitchell, Mayor Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon for you. Good morning for me. That's a great question. I think municipalities have a strong role to play. In Canada, we use the Canadian Building Code. We have our provincial building code. So while we don't have control over the building code itself, we can incentivize builders to build better, to build greener. For example, what we do when builders want to build affordable housing units, for example, we will allow what's called bonus density if they meet certain criteria. We can do the same thing in municipalities if they're going to build greener, reduce the carbon emissions, give that bonus density, for example. So if your development says on this plot of land you can only build a 3-story apartment, we might say you can build a 5-story apartment if you do it this way. So I think we have a strong role to play.
Right, thank you very much, David. We are sorry that we woke you up so early today, I guess, but thank you very much for being with us today. I move on, unless other mayors would like to contribute to that questions, if there is anybody else who would like to join, or otherwise I will move to the next question, which is for Paul here, for Paul Dennett for Salford. It said that Salford has been a front runner in GM in integrating NBS, such as SUDS alongside the highways program. How challenging and how potentially significant could this model be across the whole city region?
So I think it's fair to say sustainable drainage systems are a significant challenge certainly for the planning system. And the reason I say that is because of the viability challenges when new development is being brought forward, and the asks we make of developers are fairly significant. It could be, obviously, when you're looking at the environment bill, you're going to have biodiversity net gain in there, you're going to have affordable housing in there, you're going to have contributions to infrastructure, roads and highways, parks and green spaces, new schools, affordable housing. All of this is very complex, especially in places like Greater Manchester, where land values and property prices are different to other parts of the country, namely London and the southeast. So we've been doing a lot of work thinking about how can we kind of fix this, what is quite a complex problem. How do you raise the finances to really scale up sustainable drainage systems as the norm across Greater Manchester? And through things like the local planning policy framework within the City Council, we've got an opportunity there to be very clear about our expectations from the developer community when development is being brought forward, but also through things like Places for Everyone, the plan of the 9 local authorities as well. Being very explicit about our policy requirements will hopefully suppress land values and ensure that some of these complex issues around viability are dealt with. But I do think there is a role for national government in this space. I have to say that, my local authority has seen its budget cut by 220 million since 2010 and 11. And actually that has led to a disempowering of local authorities in this space around green infrastructure. And inevitably it's pushed us to rely on market solutions and developer-led regeneration to drive this agenda. So for me, some of this goes back to some of the points that were raised earlier about, green financing solutions as being potentially the way forward. Quite clear to me that local authorities can't do all of this on their own, especially with rising budgets and things like children's services, adult social care. So actually, national government, the national planning policy framework, I think there needs to be some reform there. Planning legislation nationally needs to be reformed to really properly embrace this agenda and drive this agenda forward. Does the environmental bill go far enough? In my opinion, probably not, to be honest with you, when you're looking at green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, and specifically sustainable drainage systems. But I think what we're trying to do in Salford is lead by example. We've got demonstrator sites throughout the city, which will hopefully start to have an impact on the market and the industry. As this isn't really a choice. This is something we need to do. We all need to collectively work to find solutions to this problem. So work in progress. And I'm looking to the Living Lab to come up with some of the real tricky financial solutions to solve some of these problems, if I'm honest.
Yeah, well, we're hoping to be able to do that. That's a big question. Right, we'll keep to the economic impacts, and there is another question for all mayors, but I might direct that to Stephanie Asher, who's the mayor of Greater Geelong, because that's probably very relevant to the development, the recent development in Geelong. And Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us so late. I mean, it's 11 p.m. in Australia now. So the question is, how you ensure the balance is struck between encouraging economic growth and enhancing the natural environment? What policies are required to ensure the private sector support the process? And I know that recent development in Geelong probably have yielded major economic growth. So maybe Stephanie would like to answer this.
Yes, thank you, Hisham, and good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to Mayor Mitchell. I think we're all experiencing the full spectrum of time, aren't we? It is a really interesting question, and certainly we've got a growth rate of about 2.6% per annum in the Greater Geelong region, so we're one of the fastest growing regions in Australia. And we do have the challenge, particularly in Victoria, where we have a very progressive culture, I guess, and progressive government, where there's a lot of I suppose, support for response to climate change action, for planning from an environmental point of view and sustainability. But we lack the frameworks to do that, certainly at a municipal level. It's something that I did as mayor, is introduce a sustainability framework right across the organisation to include all the economic, social and financial impacts across everything that we do, not just development. But in terms of managing that balance between developers and people who don't think development should occur in their backyard, and once they've moved here, that the gate should be locked and nobody else should be allowed in, is definitely a very difficult tightrope to walk. And I think our planning scheme is more prescriptive than incentive-based. So we do have quite strict requirements for environmental design and certainly for green space requirements. And the city is definitely managing that balance at the moment, but it is a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I'll stay with you for the second question, because that's a question directed to you as well. I'm not quite sure if this question came from Australia or from UK, actually, Stephanie. But it said, my personal experience is that Australian cities are very car dominated. Have you had to invest in public transport in order to improve the streetscape through planting and suds schemes? I know that's a very relevant question to Stephanie. So.
It is indeed very relevant, and our geographic area in Greater Geelong is nearly 1,300 square kilometres. So our CBD sits roughly in the middle. So certainly where I live on the coast, we're 30 kilometres from the CBD. And the only public transport option that we have is a very irregular, infrequent, slightly uncomfortable bus. And there's not much infrastructure in terms of bus shelters, etc. So people do require their cars. Everybody drives everywhere. So, of course, whenever there's wonderful implementations like the green spine in our main street, which was Hisham's brainchild, we do have resistance to banning cars, reducing turning lanes, narrowing roads, taking away car parks. It's a source of constant debate, and people do understand the need for it. I think philosophically everybody would like to be out of their cars, but we don't have the fabulous traffic-free cycle paths that you have, and I saw on that beautiful video in Salford, and that's exactly what we need. We've put together a shared trails master plan, and it's actually the #1 priority of all 11 councillors for the investment for the next 4 years. But it is very, very slow going and very difficult to get the engineering officers and traffic officers' heads around making it happen, rather than trying to realise why we can't make it happen when the roadsides have not been purchased. We don't have the room. There's power poles, there's various infrastructure barriers, and it just becomes really, really difficult. And it's not actually our role, it's the state government role. So public transport and major roads are the state government and not the local government. So it's a very difficult lobbying process, but we are getting there. We are relentless with the pressure, and I think our solution at this stage is just to provide those paths in so that there are alternatives to cars. And then we can start thinking about scooters, we can start thinking about bikes, we can start thinking about how to use tech to share the trails properly so people can take their dogs walking as well as ride their bikes and their horses and their scooters, etc. So I think it's a mixed solution, but it's a big challenge and very big population to try and get moving around.
Right, thank you, Stephanie. As you can see, I mean, it's the context which is very important to these political questions, because it differs so much across the world. And when we move now from Australia, which has a really car-dominated culture, to another, back to Karlsruhe, which is very environmentally and green development drive, with the Green Party involved in Karlsruhe. The next question might address this, and I might direct that to Lord Mayor Frank Mentrup, as well as David Mitchell, because David has a very different political setting as well. So the question here, do the mayors feel they have sufficient autonomy from central government to pursue innovative policies? I guess for Germany, it won't be a central government, it will be a regional government. So do they have enough autonomy? And I'm sure Paul would love to answer this question as well.
Yeah, first I will start. I think we have a lot of autonomy to be the operations for the operation responsibilities for changing mobility and other things else. But the Germans are constructed to do the things only if everybody has to do it. So we have some conditions from the national government, we have some conditions from the federal states, and then we could do it. And in the moment I have a problem that my big green party here in Karlsruhe will change the world, but I haven't got the legal conditions of the government to do it. And to get cooperations, especially with the industry, because everybody say, okay, the struggle against climate change is very important, but from my economics now, it is not interesting enough to change our energy systems, because my concurrent in the next area, he is not forced to do it like me, and so he will not do it. And so my economic situation is more sufficient for future, but it is not so good in the economics than of my neighbor. And so I have a problem, and there is not enough system and not enough legal conditions from the national area, and but my Greens don't accept it. And so they say, okay, if the national area is not able to do it, then you at your local area, we will do it double so good. And this is very difficult to manage it. So I think I'm autonomous enough to do it in the operational, but I need some conditions and some legal instruments to execute it.
Right, thank you. Mayor Mitchell?
I would say that we have a similar issue as the Lord Mayor just said, where if we're doing something but our neighbors aren't doing it, and of course in our action to become greener, it increases the tax rates, for example, or increase costs to our residents, there's actually an incentive for them to move elsewhere to pay less tax. In Canada, we as municipalities are free to innovate as much as we can. Our barrier is actually the money. We're so reliant on federal and provincial dollars because we are essentially the tax collectors for other levels of government. And they take quite a bit of the money that we collect, and we get, dribs and drabs back. But at the end of the day, we want to be as innovative as possible, but the barrier is we don't have the funding. And just like the Lord Mayor said, if we do move forward with the project, you're incentivizing people to go where it costs less to live. So it's finding that balance of innovating without disrupting, the local economy or the residents.
All right, thank you, David. What would you like?
Yeah, as I'm sure you suspect, I've got a lot to say on this. I mean, look at the NHS reforms recently, the levelling up agenda, planning reforms, the devolution white paper, which was all about local government reorganisation, if anyone read the press around all of that. All of that points to the further centralisation of government in this country. And that's off the back of already acknowledging that we probably live in one of the most centralised states in the developed world, i.e. the decisions made in Westminster and Whitehall have profound implications for what happens here in Salford, Greater Manchester, and across our local communities. I think what frustrates me a little bit about the form of the state at the moment is the amount of time we spend bidding for pilots and initiatives and the bureaucracy that sits behind what are relatively small sums of money. And this fundamentally needs to change. We need to properly embrace devolution in this country, and we need to align it with proper powers at city regional levels. We've made great progress, I think, in Greater Manchester under Mayor Burnham's leadership. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of the progress that's been made is not because of national legislation, not because of actually we have powers locally to raise the revenue and the funding we need, but actually it's because of using the soft power of the office to almost, drag government nationally, kicking and screaming to properly engage meaningfully with us here in Greater Manchester. So there's so much more on this agenda as far as I'm concerned that we need to do. It is very worrying when you look at the press and the media at the moment that the drift seems to be towards more centralisation in this country. That is not the solution, the agenda we're talking about here in terms of tackling climate change. When I look at Salford, all the great work we're doing in Salford is because of partnerships, it's because of people, and it's because of people getting behind this agenda, including the university, all the great work with the friends groups in our parks, the Salford Volunteer Rangers, the great partnership we've got with the Environment Agency, which has resulted in a second flood basin, which we saw on the video recently, Heritage Lottery funding coming into Peel Park, contributions from Section 106, the Mayor's Challenge Fund around walking and cycling, and importantly, this Ignition project and the Living Lab and what's going to come out of all this. This is all driven locally and actually with very little support from central government. And I think we need to acknowledge that. Government need to back this agenda. They need to make sure we've got proper devolution, and they need to finance this agenda as well. They have a role in all of this. It's not all about, global capital or private finance driving this agenda. The state has to play a role for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, there is generally a big push and move towards cities leading development in the future. City regions around the world, not just in the United Kingdom. I think in the United Kingdom we are a little bit slower in this, but generally globally, city regions are the ones who's taking the leads, and there are fantastic examples everywhere. So I think that is the direction we are moving towards anyway. There is a question here about business and our relation to business. So the question here is, how have you managed to engage citizens in the installation of green infrastructure? What have you seen as the challenges? So it's just how to engage the population, general population, translate the technology to them, get them engaged, as well as the developer and private investors. I wonder who would like to address that first.
Well, I can jump in and just
start, David? Yes.
Yeah, the challenge is always, I think it's the same probably around the world. The question is, what's in it for me? Why should I spend money? And for many of us, we just say, well, it's the right thing to do. We need to lower our carbon footprint. We have to worry about climate change. Our town is divided by a tidal river. And if we have 3 meters of sea level rise, then we lose half of our downtown. But at the same time, people are like, okay, so what's in it for me? So for what we've been able to do when we engage the citizens is talk about, and we're a very old town, homes are heated electrically, things like that, excuse me. And so what we've talked about is that making those green investments in their private residences will more than cover the costs. So if their power bill, for example, is $400 a month, but we can save them $450 a month in costs, or sorry, rather, if their investment was less than the savings or greater than the savings. No, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. Sorry. If their power savings are greater than the cost of the upgrades to their house, then there's no reason not to do it. So if the loan, they take out a $200 loan, $200 a month to do the energy upgrades, but they save $250 a month in power, then there's no reason not to do it. So when we get to that what's in it for me question, the answer is we're able to say with definitive proof, you're going to save money. And then that removes the barrier and we move forward.
Right, thank you. I think that's probably a question also for Mayor Asher, because there have been a strong movement with the development of Central Geelong to engage people, to get them away out of their cars and try to engage with a larger green agenda in the city. What are the challenges you face to do so, Stephanie?
It's a very good question, and I think as a communications professional myself, it always comes down to strategic and well-delivered communication. And I actually think we haven't done it very well as a council. Certainly with the Green Spine as an example, nobody really spent a lot of time repeating the key message of we are linking two parks with one linear street, and we started the project in the middle. So we did the middle of 6 blocks, and I think the context was lost for a lot of people. And while they want to support any positive moves towards greening of the city and they can see the benefits, if all they're experiencing is traffic jams and getting stuck for longer than they used to, and peak hour becoming a nightmare, if they don't see what the end game is, then it becomes a debate, which it never really needs to be. And I certainly City of Greater Geelong, I think, dropped the ball with explaining why it was happening, what the benefits were, what the long-term vision is. And I still think we've got work to do there. We're now working on the second block of that project, so it will start to take shape. But when people can see it, but they don't understand the long-term vision, I think you struggle. So I think it is about communicating effectively, being very consistent with the messaging and painting the vision for people so that they can see it is really important.
Right, thank you very much. I have a final question that I would that addressed to all of you, and it's a good question to end our panel with. And the question that I will ask each of you is, what do you feel is your one standout project or approach that other countries could learn from to help them increase green infrastructure and reduce the impact of climate change? What would be your standout project that you would like to promote to other countries?
For us, it's our Energized Bridgewater plan. So this is our energy poverty reduction strategy that also has a green component. So for those who watched the video earlier, 40% of the people in our community live in energy poverty. So that means they spend more than 10% of their income on their energy needs, and that could be their power, their gas, the petrol for their car, all those energy needs. And so living in that energy poverty means that some of them are making the choice between paying the rent or their mortgage or heating their home. And so this project will work to retrofit and make more energy efficient all the homes in our community. The money it saves, as I mentioned before, is greater than the cost of the project itself. So that money goes back into the pocket of the residents, which we're spenders. So that money will then filter into the local economy, more jobs, and it's just a circular economy that grows and grows and grows. And what I love about this project is it's scalable. You can scale it up and you can scale it down. I spoke at a conference 2 years ago, and representatives from the city of Chennai, India, so a city of about 8 million people, saw that they could scale this up to work in their city. And we're only 9,000 people in my town. So to me, I think it's a cool project that can have great implications around the world.
All right, thank you, David. I wonder who would like to go next, Paul?
You want me to go next? Okay, yeah. I think it's a really difficult one for me, but I'd probably say it's the 126 million over the last 10 years we've invested into green infrastructure. And what I mean there is walking and cycling infrastructure. So things like Swinton Greenway, RHS links, the second flood basin now, which has just become an amazing asset in the heart of the community, working with the Environment Agency. Without their support, that £10.3 million project would never have happened. And for us, during COVID, we've learned an awful lot about the importance of green spaces and off-road walking and cycling infrastructure. And that is really transforming the city, how the city functions, and how people see mobility in the city as well. The positive feedback that we're just inundated with through the local authority really reaffirms to us that the communities in our residence city want to see more of this. And thanks to Mayor Burnham and the Walking and Cycling Commissioner and the Mayor's Challenge Fund, we've been able to download millions and millions of pounds to be invested directly here in Salford to deliver more walking and cycling infrastructure. We've only just begun in some respects, and we started doing a lot of this before it was in vogue, but there's so much more to do. And there's a real passion in the city to see us succeed in this space. And this will have a positive impact in so many respects, both in terms of air quality, reducing the need for people to use cars, encouraging to link this up with, transport nodes in terms of, heavy rail, trams, and buses as well. So, we are taking a very strategic approach to walking and cycling infrastructure, linking it with schools, linking it with our town centres. Salford is a collection of townships, but I'd say that is probably the biggest impact we're having at the moment in the city that resonates with our communities, with our residents, and speaks to what they want to see more of. So, yeah.
Thank you. Right, maybe I can go to Mayor Asher next.
Thank you. I'm going to cheat and have 3 quick ones. I think the Million Trees Over 10 Years program, because it captures the imagination of the community, people can get involved, and people just love trees. We're naturally a grasslands region, really, but they just love trees and love canopy trees. So that probably from a populist perspective. The Sparrowvale wetlands, and I think because from watching the videos of the other mayors and the other municipalities, obviously a really sensible, logical and win-win solution. So that's really validating to see that we seem to have managed that drainage potentially quite well. And probably the third one is our potential with the Greater Geelong, the Geelong northern and western growth areas, 110,000 population over the next 15 to 20 years. Just the potential there to set the benchmark for sustainable design and planning and actually creating new ways of doing things that there will be hopefully what people look to as the benchmark.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. And last but not least, Lord Mayor Mentrup in Karlsruhe. All right, okay. All right, so I think that is the end of our panels, and at the end, I would like very much to thank all the mayors for their contribution and their time. It's a busy time, and we are very happy to see people in person again, as well as on video. So I'd like to thank our audience here and our audience online. I would like to particularly thank the group who made this event and this launch possible. Our GMCA partner, Mark Atherton, is here with us, as well as Amanda Amanda Skeldon, who did a fantastic job with Sam Hartley and Jennifer Lane. I'm very happy with how much Michael Ramsey and Sam Evans have give support to our project. There is the technical team, which you cannot see, of Make Events, who really have been working to join all people from all other parts of the world, and our University of Salford team. And thank you very much, Andrew, and Richard and Ben, for making this happen. Of course, I would like to thank our partner and our team of researchers who works on the Living Lab from the University of Salford, and also we have James here from the University of Manchester. So I would like to thank the people who have been involved and still working with us, Dr. Richard Fitton here, Professor Will Swan, Dr. Inji Kanawi, Professor Philip James, Tiana Blanusa, who's joining us from Reading, the University of Reading, and of course Dr. Nick Davis, who's with us today, and very pleased to have him back to the project with Dr. Telghani, and most of all Nurhan Hisham, who has been working putting enormous effort to make this happen today. And of course, everybody from the University of Salford, including Will, with us today. Thank you ever so much, and make sure that if you missed the virtual tours, it will be online. I hope you continue to engage with us and with the Ignition project. As I said, it's not a demonstration project. It will be going on all the time, and I'm sure our fantastic contractor partner here, SEL, will make sure that continue working with us, continue to improve it in the future, and make sure that you go and see us on www.ignition.com. Use our online data, come and visit us, and give us your feedback. Thank you ever so much, and goodbye.